A city rises against the sunset, towers of stone and something grown rather than built. In the streets below, tall shapes move between market stalls, upright, feathered, carrying tools in three-fingered hands. This is not a film set. This is Earth today, in a timeline where the asteroid that erased the dinosaurs missed by 6 hours. 66 million years of divergent evolution separate that timeline from ours. No age of mammals, no primates climbing down from the trees. No humans at all, just the descendants of animals we buried under 66 million years of rock, still walking, still building, still asking questions about the sky. This is the story of a single afternoon that decided everything, twice. On October the 3rd, 66 million years ago, an asteroid roughly 10 kilometers wide struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. It hit at close to 60 degrees, one of the worst possible angles, driving vaporized rock and sulfur high into the atmosphere. Within hours, the sky over most of the planet went dark. In 1980, physicist Luis Alvarez and his son, geologist Walter Alvarez, found a strange thin band of clay running through rock layers all over the planet, from Italy to New Zealand to the American West. The band was packed with iridium, a metal rare on Earth's surface but common in asteroids. They proposed something that sounded absurd at the time. A rock from space had ended the age of dinosaurs. It took a decade, and the discovery of a hidden crater under the Gulf of Mexico, before most of the scientific community agreed. Researchers studying that crater, named Chicxulub after a nearby town, found something specific about the timing. The asteroid arrived near the worst possible point in its orbit for triggering a global catastrophe. A window of a few hours earlier or later would have sent it into open ocean instead of the shallow, sulfur-rich rock of the Yucatan Shelf. Water absorbs impact energy differently. Less debris thrown into the stratosphere. A shorter, milder winter. In our timeline, 3/4 of all species on Earth died within 2 years. Every non-avian dinosaur lineage that had existed for over 150 million years disappeared with them. Sunlight all but stopped reaching the ground. Plants died first, then the animals that ate them, then the animals that ate those animals. In this other timeline, the rock arrives 6 hours later. It lands in open Atlantic water, hundreds of kilometers from any coast. The impact still flattens coastlines with tsunamis, still throws ash into the upper atmosphere. But the sulfur cloud is thinner, the darkness shorter. Photosynthesis recovers within months instead of years. The dinosaurs survive. For the previous 50 million years, dinosaurs had already dominated nearly every ecological niche larger than a house cat. Long-necked sauropods stripped whole forests bare. Armored ankylosaurs grazed low vegetation. Horned ceratopsians moved in herds numbering in the thousands. Mammals existed too. Small and nocturnal, most no bigger than a modern shrew. Squeezed into the narrow gaps dinosaurs left unoccupied. Without a mass extinction, that arrangement simply continues. Large reptiles keep the large body niches. Mammals stay small, stay in the shadows, stay marginal for another 66 million years. There is no sudden opening for warm-blooded animals to diversify into. No rise of the primates. No branch of that family tree that eventually produces us. Some dinosaur lines simply persist unchanged for millions of years, filling roles no one else can fill. Sauropod descendants remain the planet's largest land animals, browsing forest canopies too high for anything else to reach. Duck-billed hadrosaurs continue moving in enormous seasonal herds the way wildebeest cross the Serengeti in our own world, except 40 feet long and traveling in the hundreds of thousands. But something keeps happening on a smaller branch of the tree, in one lineage in particular. Troodon, a small, fast, feathered predator about the size of a large dog, already carried the highest brain-to-body ratio of any dinosaur known to science. Paleontologist Dale Russell proposed in 1982 that given another 66 million years of uninterrupted evolution, a Troodon-like lineage could plausibly develop upright posture, forward-facing eyes, grasping hands, and steadily expanding intelligence. He called the hypothetical result a dinosauroid. For decades, it was dismissed as science fiction wearing a lab coat. Recent research into crow tool use, octopus problem solving, and parrot memory has made the idea considerably harder to laugh off. In this timeline, something close to that happens. Across tens of millions of years, several lineages descended from small, feathered, quick-witted theropods begin using tools consistently, the way crows and octopuses already do in our own world. First simple things: a sharp stone to open a shell, a stick to pull grubs from bark. Tool use becomes tradition. Tradition becomes technique, passed down and refined across generations that measure time differently than we do. Their hands evolve along a different path than ours, keeping 3 long fingers instead of 5, well-suited to fine manipulation without ever needing a thumb. Their eyes stay large, built for the dim light of forest canopies their ancestors never fully left. Their skin carries feathers rather than fur, in patterns that shift with mood the way a chameleon's skin shifts with its surroundings, an inherited signal system older than language itself. When cities eventually appear, they look nothing like ours. Their builders never needed to invent the wheel the way early humans did. Distant ancestors adapted to running and gripping, not rolling loads across flat ground, and the habit shows in architecture built around ramps and terraces rather than streets meant for carts. Their ancestors laid eggs in shared nests, and city planning still carries the memory. Structures built around communal incubation chambers instead of private houses built for 2. Roads curve instead of running straight, inherited from herd movement patterns that predate intelligence by tens of millions of years. Their calendar works differently too. A species descended from animals that commonly live 70, 80, sometimes over 100 years, develops a different relationship with patience and long-term planning than one that historically died around 35. Their children mature slowly, hatching already able to walk and forage but not reaching full intellectual maturity for 2 decades or more. raised communally by dozens of adults rather than by a single pair of parents. Picture one of them at the start of an ordinary day. She wakes in a shared incubation hall, warmed overnight by pipes carrying heated water, rather than a furnace burning fuel. Breakfast comes from a communal kitchen 2 floors down, fruit and cultivated cycad grain, eaten standing, the way her ancestors grazed on the move for 150 million years before anyone built a kitchen at all. She walks to work along a curved road, feathers catching the early light, greeting neighbors with a head tilt instead of a wave. None of this feels strange to her. It is simply Tuesday. Their history carries its own version of conflict, shaped by very different instincts than ours. A species evolved from pack-hunting predators and herd-grazing prey inherits different triggers for aggression than a species evolved from tribal primates competing over scarce territory. Some of their wars trace back to disputes over nesting grounds, fought with a ferocity our own history recognizes immediately. Others end faster than human wars typically do, settled through ritualized displays inherited from courtship behavior, a show of strength, substituting for actual bloodshed, more often than it does among us. Their version of a united global community arrives centuries earlier than ours did. Not from any greater virtue, but because coordinated migration across enormous distances was already baked into their biology long before cities existed. Their agriculture grows from a different starting point as well. Instead of grain crops, bred from wild grasses, their staple foods trace back to cycads and early flowering plants that never went through a human-driven domestication process, selected instead, over hundreds of thousands of years, for yield and resilience. Some lineages farm smaller dinosaur species, much the way humans farm cattle, a practice their ethicists still argue about, given how close those farmed species sit on the same family tree. Their science, when it develops, arrives at many of the same discoveries ours did. Physics doesn't care what shape the physicist is. Gravity, thermodynamics, the periodic table, these hold regardless of who does the measuring. But the order of discovery shifts. A species with better low-light vision studies astronomy earlier, mapping the moon and planets, centuries before developing written language complex enough to record the observations. A species built for endurance over raw speed builds different machines to compensate for what their bodies can't do alone, favoring efficient gliding transport over the wheeled vehicles humans built first. Their medicine develops around a body plan that heals differently than ours. Bones that can regenerate more readily, a healing process closer to what modern reptiles and birds already show in our own world. Diseases that would devastate a mammal population move through their cities on a different timeline entirely, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, always strange to imagine from the outside. Eventually they leave the ground entirely. Their first flights off the planet look different from ours. Built by a species already comfortable thinking in 3 dimensions, descended from gliding and climbing ancestors rather than flightless ground apes. They reach their own moon roughly around the same span of centuries it took us, driven less by rivalry between nations and more by curiosity about a light that has hung in their sky since before their kind could reason about it at all. Their art carries the memory of that curiosity everywhere. Murals of open sky covering walls, the way human cave paintings once covered stone, an old fascination with the thing hanging overhead that almost ended everything, long before anyone remembered why. Small mammals still exist in this world, holding the same ecological role they've held for 200 million years. Background creatures, nocturnal, easy to overlook, something resembling a rat, something resembling a shrew, living in the gaps between roads that were never built for it. Occasionally kept as a household pet, occasionally regarded as a pest to be driven out of the grain stores. No large mammal ever emerges. No elephant, no whale, no wolf, no ape. Every niche a mammal might have grown into is already filled by the descendant of something once called a dinosaur. There is no separate, parallel story where a small, clever primate stands upright on an African savanna, picks up a sharpened stone and starts down its own 66-million-year road. That story required an empty world, a planet with its dominant animals cleared out and its niches sitting open. This world was never emptied. The oceans tell a similar story. In our timeline, marine reptiles like mosasaurs and plesiosaurs died out alongside their land-based relatives, leaving the seas open for whales and dolphins to eventually fill, mammals returning to water millions of years after their ancestors first crawled out of it. Here, those marine reptile lines never disappear. Descendants of mosasaurs, sleek and enormous, remain the ocean's dominant predators, and the largest whale that will ever exist in our world never gets the empty water it would have needed to grow into. Birds, in this timeline, barely exist as a separate concept at all. In our world, birds are the one line of dinosaurs that survived the extinction, small enough and adaptable enough to squeeze through a catastrophe that killed almost everything larger. Here, with no catastrophe to squeeze through, the ancestors of what we call birds never needed to shrink down that far. Some feathered flying lineages still exist, But they sit as one branch among hundreds, not as the last dinosaurs standing. Their scientists eventually find the Chicxulub crater too, buried under the same layer of rock human geologists mapped in our own timeline. They read the iridium layer the same way we do, as a fingerprint left by an object from space, arrived at through their own version of the Alvarez hypothesis, discovered independently, centuries into their own scientific tradition. Their calculations, run through very different mathematics, arrived at the same 6-hour window. Some of them build models of a world where that asteroid landed on schedule, where the skies stayed dark for years instead of months, where almost nothing larger than a chicken made it through. A few of their researchers, sitting in labs we will never see, run simulations of a planet ruled by small, warm-blooded mammals climbing down out of trees, growing larger brains, eventually building their own cities out of stone and steel. Most conclude the odds against such a specific outcome are close to unimaginable. Too many separate events all needing to break the same way. A few publish papers anyway, describing, purely as a mathematical curiosity, a species that never got the chance to exist, a world that never got the chance to happen. The idea eventually escapes the research papers and finds its way into their entertainment, the way speculative fiction always does. Their equivalent of a summer film shows crumbling ruins overtaken by strange, hairless, upright creatures with soft skin and small teeth. City builders who never developed feathers or scales at all. Audiences find it unsettling in the specific way we find alien invasion stories unsettling. A fear less about the monster itself, and more about what it would mean to lose the world to something so completely different from everything that came before it. None of them realize how close the story sits to something real. A version of Earth, sitting one asteroid's width away from their own. None of this happened. The asteroid hit exactly where and when it did, at the single worst angle for the animals it killed, and the single best angle, in the end, for us. Every human being who has ever lived exists because a 10-kilometer rock crossed Earth's orbit inside a window of a few hours, 66 million years ago. Shift that window and you don't get a world of cavemen instead of engineers. You get no humans at all. You get feathered scientists asking the same questions we ask, standing in cities we can't quite picture, looking up at a sky that, for them too, once fell, and this time, kept falling somewhere else. Somewhere, in an alternate version of Wyoming, in a formation of rock that in our world holds Tyrannosaurus bones, one of their paleontologists kneels in the dust of an old riverbed. She isn't digging up dinosaurs. She's digging up something smaller. An animal with grasping hands, a rounded skull, teeth built for a varied diet. She has no name for it yet. In her world, it's just another failed branch, another line that never made it past a few million years of quiet, forgettable existence. She has no way of knowing it once had a name for itself. She has no way of knowing it once called itself human.